of want to give you some indication of the process. And it's somewhat arbitrary. I mean, I'm doing this, I'm going to make all these charts that you see on Canvas board, so it's relatively available and inexpensive. And for the sake of this example, I'm going to use the phthalo green blue shade, PG7, and Pyro Red, PR 254. I've got some white and some black and burnt umber. I'll also show you how I made the value chart, just so you have an idea of how to proceed. But really, it's up to you in your exploration and what you think you need to learn from it. I'm going to do a 7-step moving from the green to the red and show my progression. What I may do is add a bit of white to the green so that it's a little more visible how the steps are changing. And you can see, hopefully just see how this works. All right, so let's say I was doing 6 samples, so I'd pick a bigger canvas board. This is just as an example. So if you were doing all your complementaries, I think I used 12 by 16 inch canvas boards. Again, it's up to you. How many colors are you mixing, and how you could probably do 5 steps if you wanted, or 9 steps. It's really, really up to you. And how, like, what you want to see is the progression and the change. And once you've seen enough, you may not even need to do it in neat squares. It could be a more randomized mixing gradation across here. It's whatever you need when you need to learn something. But I'm gonna show you the first step here, and then I'll mix up the 7. What I would suggest, if you are going to do something like this, I would mix up your 7 mixtures first and then lay them into the chart. So let's just get started here. So our first square would be the color that we're going to start with. And I'm just going to use the palette knife here. And I just want to get the color on there. So I want that square to be fairly covered, and ideally not a whole lot of ridges. So you can experiment with different palette knives, and maybe your final swipe can just be a single palette knife so it gets a little smoother. So that's that. So this is where it all gets a little tricky. Sometimes I just, in the interest of saving my tape, I'll reuse that piece on the other edge. So now this square is going to be a little bit of phthalo green, and let's just take a bit of the red. And that might be too big a jump, so let's take some of that. And again, you've got to wipe off your knife constantly. Take some green, mix that back in. So that might be our first jump. And you can see that you need a bit of paint. So that might be our second jump. And that's starting to feel very neutral. Right? Hard to tell. So what you can do if you want to just test a bit of it, yeah, that's feeling maybe a bit blue still. So you could try a bit more red. So again, the mass tone of the color feels pretty dark and neutral. And again, we're going to need a little more red here. But the journey is what's really important here. So if you haven't got a lot of experience of mixing color, it's watching this transform, I think, that becomes the really whoops, the big learning, right? Sorry, I lost track of where I was there. This is the journey right here. Is sort of these aha moments if you haven't seen these effects before. So, and this is a great example. So this is probably a bit on the green side, a bit on the cool. So this phthalo has a blue that's kind of hard, a blue undertone that's really hard to overcome. And that's what I was seeing here. And now it's gone a little too red. So we can add a bit of the green and cool it back down. But it's very close, and as I say, I kind of know how these things behave, so I'm not too concerned about it. So kind of going down the track a bit. So we just need a little bit of green now, and we're going to add more of the red. The other thing that I forgot to mention at the outset is if you want, so it just shows you how powerful that is. So when you get something like that, you can just take some of the color out, and let's mix the red in. What was I saying? Oh, if you want these mixtures to dry very quickly, then you can add them. I'm an oil painter, so I could add an alkyd medium, and that would speed up the drying, or some kind of Galkyd or Liquin, whatever your weapon of choice is. Of course, acrylics, if anything, your struggle is to keep the things wet, your piles of paint wet, so you might need to use retarder. So let's just warm that up a bit more. It is, hopefully you're starting to see that red. And Primerol stands up fairly well to the phthalo. So we could probably leave that there. And then, so in addition, we've got 7 spots. So these are 2, so we need 5 mixtures. So let's just make, so you can see how you're going to be using up a fair amount of paint. But again, if you wanted a neutralized red, you know, maroon, something in this ballpark, this is one way of getting there, right? If you had a red object with a green light on it, this might end up being a color that you would use. So let's just get a little more red out. So okay, let's just grab some of this mixture here. And you can just freehand this. That's kind of what I do all the time. If you're concerned about that edge, I'm just going to move this out of the way for a second and just show you this. So you're concerned about this edge here. So you could lay a straight, some kind of straight edge there. And just guide your palette, whoops, get it to sit right down on your surface there. And just, it's a bit wonky, but as I say, this isn't about perfection. It's just kind of about and I was a little stingy on the paint there, but there's my next color in the sequence. So again, you've got to constantly wipe these knives off with a paper towel. That's clean. And if you're careful, if you've made a mess, you can float the color over top of it without too much. I mean, you get the idea. If you let that dry, you've got a really nice sequence taking you from phthalo green through to pyro red. And because we added the white to the phthalo green, we get a sense of this neutral here and a progression from one color to the other. As I say, you could extend this and make this 9. It's really up to you. But that's how I made the charts, and you can make as many or as little as you please.